Today, we are going to discuss bankroll management tips. Now, I know some of you hate the idea of having to manage your bankroll. However, it is vitally important if you want to have any chance to actually succeed at poker. Because to win at poker, you have to do three things. Number one, find a game you can beat. That implies either you study and get really good at poker so you're better than almost everyone, or you make a point to play with really bad players. Number two, you have to play in that game that you have a big edge in, or an edge in general, a lot. And number three, the part that a lot of people forget is they forget to keep a proper bankroll. Understand that your bankroll is not an ATM. Whenever you win money from poker, you should not take that money and cash it out. Back whenever I first started playing poker, in my local hometown, there was one other very good poker player. And every time he would win a poker tournament, or win a big amount in a cash game, he would take that money and buy a brand new CD, a compact disc. If you're young, you can Google what that is. Crazy technology. Whenever I would win a tournament, I would take that money and put it in a box and keep it, and use that to continue playing more games for bigger stakes. And it turns out that guy who bought a bunch of CDs was really happy at the moment. He had a bunch of CDs, but now he's no longer a professional poker player or a poker player in general. Here I am, still doing it, still winning, because I made a point to not squander my money. Realize that withdrawing your funds will slow your progression, because whenever your bankroll is not big enough to play a game, well, if you have good discipline and you don't want to go broke, you should not be playing that game. Realize that your ideal bankroll is determined by a few things. Primarily, how big of an edge you have in your particular game, the amount of variance in the game, and your risk of ruin tolerance, how happy you are to actually go broke or have to move down. Realize, though, if you do not have an edge against your opponents, if you are a losing player in your game, you are going to lose no matter what you do. No amount of bankroll management, as some people like to call it, will save you. Some people think you can lose and then double the stakes and you'll probably win. And if you lose there, double the stakes and you'll probably win. That's called the martingale system. Google that too if you want. It does not work. Any sort of bankroll management tip where you're playing a game where you do not have an edge will result in you losing. I'm here to teach you how to win poker long-term and ensure that you can continue playing in a profitable manner. First, we're going to discuss cash game bankroll management requirements, and then we're going to discuss tournament bankroll management requirements. If you're playing some sort of exotic game like Spin and Goes or a different poker variant like Pot Limit Omaha, then you're going to need different bankroll management requirements. But we're going to be discussing the two primary games that most people play: No Limit Hold'em cash games and then No Limit Hold'em tournaments. Okay, here are the bankroll requirements for No Limit Hold'em Texas-style cash games. Remember, your bankroll management requirements should be determined by your win rate, the variance in the game, and your risk of ruin tolerance. This presumes you don't really want to go broke. These are relatively cautious requirements, and they presume you have this edge here. I'm also presuming you're not overly insane at the poker table and not overly nitty. If you're playing an overly loose, aggressive, battly strategy, then you may need a bigger bankroll. If you're playing super nitty, well, you probably won't have that big of an edge, so don't do that. Play good, strong, fundamentally sound poker. All right, how do we read this? Here's your win rate. Here's the bankroll you need. This number here presumes we are playing 1-2 No Limit Hold'em. I know a lot of you are playing that game, so that's why I wanted to list the exact amount for 1-2 No Limit Hold'em. If you're playing 2-5, well, multiply the numbers by 2.5. If you're playing 5-10, multiply the numbers by 5. Come on, you can handle that. All right, if you're winning 3 big blinds per 100 hands, which is roughly 1 big blind per hour in live cash games, which is not a big win rate at all, you're going to need about 10,000 big blinds or $20,000 for 1-2 No Limit Hold'em. A pretty big bankroll. If you don't have much of an edge, if you're winning a whopping $2 per hour at 1-2 No Limit Hold'em, you need a lot of money because you are very rarely, well, you just simply don't have an edge. Simple as that. Your edge is minimal. If you have a medium edge, let's say you're winning 13 big blinds per 100 hands, or something like 4 big blinds per hour, so $8 per hour at 1-2 No Limit Hold'em, then you need something like $7,000. This is where a lot of okay poker players who are working hard on their game are going to fall. And this may sound like a lot of money for 1-2 No Limit Hold'em, $7,000 or 3,500 big blinds, but really it's not. This is not that much money at all, and this is actually bigger than an edge than you should expect to have online. If you're playing online, even if you have a pretty big edge, the most you're going to be winning is something like 10 big blinds per 100 hands. You're going to find that online games are usually much tougher than live games for all sorts of reasons. We're not going to get into that today. If you are a big winner in live cash games, you're going to be winning something like 25 big blinds per 100 hands, maybe even more. And if that's the case, you don't actually need much money at all. You see here, you only need 2,000 big blinds, or about $4,000. Now you may say, I only have $400, and 1-2's the smallest game that I can play. What should I do? Well, the answer is you should probably play online for tiny stakes and grind up your money. When I started playing poker, I had $50 to my name. Not a whole lot of money. So I played really tiny stakes online, and I grinded it up. Realize that poker is a great way to get rich slowly. It is not such a great way to get rich quick, assuming you actually want to get rich. Now, if you just want to gamble and shoot your money in there, sure, do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. But I'm teaching you here how to actually succeed long term. You have to have a little bit of discipline. So, in cash games, there actually is not a whole lot of variance. But in tournaments, there is a lot of variance because say you play a 1,000-person tournament, how often are you actually going to win that tournament? Well, I don't know, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 500 if you're good. Not a lot, which means you're going to go on big downswings. So you're going to find that the amount of variance you experience in tournaments is going to be a little bit different based on how many players are in the tournament. Now, it's very important to determine your return on investment. We're going to discuss that in just a second, how to actually do that. These numbers here presume you have a 30% return on investment. 30%. 30% return on investment, which is what most pretty good poker players who are winning in the game will have in most softish tournaments. If you're playing high rollers in the Poker Go studio, maybe you have 10% return on investment or less. If you're playing super duper duper soft, tiny stakes tournaments with no rake against the worst players in the world, your return on investment will probably be higher. If you're playing a gigantic field main event, your return on investment may be higher. But these are the requirements if you have about 30% ROI. So notice here that the number of players in the field impacts the bankroll you need, because as there are more players in the field, you will inevitably experience more variance because you're not going to win the tournament quite as often. So say there are 45 players in your tournament, like a small local tournament that happens in many casinos around the world, you only need something like 69, 70, 100 buy-ins, something like that for these 45 to 100 person tournaments, which is, again, may seem like a lot, but it's not really that much money. If you're playing a $100 buy-in tournament, you need something like $7,000 or $10,000 in your bankroll to ensure you do not go broke. Maybe that sounds like a lot, but I promise it's really not. You are going to go on big downswings in tournaments. And again, if you're not properly bankrolled, you should probably be playing smaller games. A lot of people don't like to hear the idea that they need to be playing smaller. The great thing about playing smaller, though, is that, well, you have a much larger bankroll, proportionally, to compared to the buy-in. And also, as you play smaller games, typically your opponents are far weaker, which means your edge is going to be higher. There's nothing wrong with moving down. If you were playing large field events, like series that happen once a year in your local casino, or WPT events, or WSOP events, or EPT events, or whatever, now when we're having something like 1,200 players in the field, you need something like 300 buy-ins. That's a lot. If you're playing a $1,000 World Series of Poker event with 1,200 players, you need $300,000 in your bankroll. That's a lot. Almost no one is playing properly bankrolled in this situation. And that may actually be okay if they are not playing these events all that often. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to play local $100 tournaments all year and then take your winnings to Vegas and play $3,000 buy-in, 1,200 person tournaments. That's a really bad idea. You're going to want to make sure that your spread of buy-ins that you play is not all that big. Let's say you normally play $100 buy-ins locally. Maybe when you play a big buy-in at something like $300 or $500, don't go play 1,500s or 5Ks. That would be a big, big, big mistake. The big takeaway here, though, is that first off, you need a pretty big amount of buy-ins in your bankroll to ensure you do not go broke when you're playing tournaments. And as you're playing tournaments with more and more and more players, you're going to need a larger and larger bankroll. So that previous chart presumed we had a 30% return on investment. But what you need to do is determine your actual return on investment. This implies that you are keeping track of your results. You absolutely must keep track of your results if you want to have any chance of succeeding at poker. You can't just go there and gamble and hope it works out. You need to know your edge. So, how do we determine our edge, our ROI, return on investment? Well, what you do to figure out your return on investment is you take your total profit over your sample of games and divide it by the total buy-ins. Now, your profit is the amount you win minus the amount you bought in for, just to be very, very clear. So let's say you play 100 tournaments with an average buy-in of $115. Maybe you play some $100 games, some $75 games, some $200 games, whatever. You play 100 tournaments, and the total buy-in is $11,500, which is 1150 times 100. Okay? And let's say you cashed for $15,000. What is your profit on $15,000? Well, it's $15,000 minus $11,500, which is $3,500. So we have $3,500 profit divided by $11,500, which equals a 30% return on investment. You can figure out use this formula to figure out your return on investment for any scenario. Very, very clear. Rewind it, listen again. Make sure you understand this, because knowing your return on investment will let you know how large of a buy-in or how many buy-ins you need in order to ensure you have a low risk of ruin. It is important to note, though, that your return on investment will fluctuate, sometimes wildly, from event to event based on your skill level in relation to the opponents, the number of players in the field, the structure of the tournament, etc. For example, whenever I go play tournaments in the Poker Go studio against the best players in the world, I don't expect to have a very high return on investment at all, maybe 5% or 10%. But if I go and play a main event that has 2,000 players, I expect to have a very high return on investment, maybe 50% or more. So make sure that you are accounting for that. If you're playing a $60 local tournament where 20 of that $60 goes to rake, well, you're going to have a very small edge or no edge, because you can't get away with paying 33% rake or 50% rake or whatever it ends up being out the door to the casino. You cannot do that and expect to win. So you want to make sure you are really keeping track of your results and you know how much you are profiting. If you're not profiting, well, you're losing. And if you're losing, again, no amount of bankroll management will save you. Here are some tips to help you manage your bankroll. First, recognize that you can keep a smaller bankroll than the numbers I've recommended if you consistently add funds to your bankroll. Say you have a job and you don't play poker a ton. You're not necessarily even trying to be professional, but you want to, have an edge in this hobby that you have. If you know you can, let's say, put $500 in your bankroll every month without a problem because you have plenty of disposable income, well, it's almost like over the course of the year, you have a, $6,000 bankroll, right? So if you already have $10,000 in your bankroll and you know you're going to add $6,000 to it over the course of the year, or at least you reasonably could, it's almost like you have a $16,000 bankroll, not a $10,000 bankroll. Or say you have a $2,000 bankroll currently and you know you're going to add $6,000 to it over the year. It's kind of like you have $8,000. Don't get too carried away with this concept, but recognize if you do have the money coming in and you know you're not going to go through those buy-ins over the course of that time period, then you don't necessarily need to have all that money on hand. Also, if you're willing to quickly move down, you can keep a smaller bankroll. Essentially, say you have 50 buy-ins for a tournament that has 90 players and you expect to have 30% return on investment, maybe more. In that scenario, yeah, you're not quite properly bankrolled, but if you play this tournament or maybe one or two other ones and you lose, you're going to move down and replenish your bankroll, at least in terms of buy-ins, then that'll be fine. Like say you want to go take a shot at a $1,000 game, you play 3 or 4 of these $1,000 games and you lose, you can move back to $300 games and then have a very large bankroll in relation to those buy-ins. Also, if you are willing to only play in very, very, very soft games, you can keep a smaller bankroll because your edge will be much bigger. Now, it's getting harder and harder to find games that have relatively low variance that are also very, very soft. But hey, maybe you have that. And if you have that, good for you. So you may say, how do we actually find soft games? Well, for cash games, you want to look for a party environment where everyone is looking to gamble and have fun. Simple as that. If you go into a casino Actually, I did this once in Philadelphia. I went there just to play 5-10 no limit hold'em for the day. I went in, one table, everyone was wearing hoodie, hats, headphones, and no one was talking. And the table right next to it, everyone was going nuts. They were partying, high-fiving. It was like a circus. Which table do you think you're going to have a higher edge at? The one where everyone's taking the game very seriously, or the table where everyone is having a party? Well, the party environment. I don't know why people were sitting there playing the super serious game. I kept an eye on it. I thought it must be soft for some reason. But no, those players just did not understand the idea of game selection. You want to make a point to play in games that are soft, because when the games are soft, you're going to have a bigger edge. Game selection and table selection are key for cash games. If you go to the casino and take a seat wherever they put you, and you don't move to a better seat all day, you're probably doing it wrong. Next, you're going to want to make a point to play on nights and weekends. That is when most players who have a job to support their poker habit are playing, because they have to work during the workday, right? You're going to find that nights and weekends are almost always softer than playing during the day. For tournaments, and cash games to some extent, you're going to find that when prestige is on the line, the games are usually going to be softer. There's a saying, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Is that too aggressive? Look, if you're going to play a tournament where people really want to try to win a trophy, that will attract a lot of players who, well, want to win the trophy. Do I pick on any series in particular? No. Say a poker series gives away a super massive, amazing trophy, and everyone in the local casino really wants to win that trophy. Maybe they inscribe everyone's name on it who wins it or something like that. That tournament will inevitably get all the players who want to try to win that trophy to come play it. And a lot of the players probably should not be in the tournament, at least if they want to have an edge. So you're going to find that that game's usually very, very soft. Sometimes, maybe there's a stream game at your local casino where they stream the play of a cash game. Maybe that carries some extra prestige because people like to be on the stream or on TV or whatever, right? Whenever people have the opportunity to get some added value, even if it's not monetary, that's often going to make the game softer than if they're not. I'll give you a good example of this. One time I flew to Los Angeles to play the LA Poker Classic. It was a WPT event, and it always has about 1,000 players, at least it did back in the day. 2 days before that tournament, there was a $5,000 buy-in side event. There were no satellite qualifiers to this. They didn't publicize it all that much. And that tournament got 60 players, 6-0. So the main event in 2 days was going to get 1,000 players for double the buy-in. And this tournament got 60 players. Which event do you think is going to be softer? Well, the one with 1,000 players is going to be far softer, even though the buy-in is twice as high, because people were playing that tournament to some extent for prestige. Someone told them that it makes logical sense to play this tournament series because it carries prestige, and that made that $10,000 tournament with 1,000 players super soft, and it made the 60-player $5,000 tournament super tough. It was all good players. So, did I play it? No, I skipped it. I went and played cash games and won a bunch of money. Also, you're going to want to play tournaments that have a lot of satellite qualifiers. No satellite players never like it when I say that satellite players are worse than tournament players. But most people who spend a lot of time grinding satellites and get really good at it, get really good at collecting a minimum cash. It turns out collecting a minimum cash should definitely not be your goal in tournaments. So, long story short, you want to play with players who are used to playing for 1/10 of the stakes in a different structured game. Simple as that. If a tournament has a lot of satellite qualifiers and you are very good at tournaments, you want to be playing with those players more often than not. Next, you must have discipline. You must have discipline. Just because a game exists does not mean that you have to play it. So many people think that they have to play a tournament because all their friends are playing it. Again, consider a scenario where your casino has a yearly tournament that's bigger buy-in than normal, much bigger buy-in than normal, and everyone in the local area tries to play it because they want to win the trophy. Do you have to play it? Well, say you're normally bankrolled for $100 buy-in games, and this tournament has a $2,500 buy-in. And let's say you have $10,000 in your bankroll. You're pretty well bankrolled for your $100 buy-in games. Should you play the $2,500 tournament or the $1,000 tournament, whatever it ends up being? The answer is no. Maybe if the tournament is $500 buy-in, maybe you can justify it. But if it's $1,000 or $1,500, whatever, It's not for you. Sorry. That's okay. Just because a game exists does not mean that you have to play. For cash games, say you normally play 5-10 no limit at your local casino, and you go in, and the 5-10 no limit game that you normally play, that's normally pretty good, is abnormally difficult. It's all good players. Should you play? Well, the answer is no. Either don't play that day, or perhaps find a softer game. Maybe you need to play 2-5 that day. That's okay. There was one summer in Las Vegas where I would go to Bellagio to play cash games. I used to do that after every tournament that I would play. I'd play tournaments all day, and then whenever I'd bust, I'd go play cash games. This was before you could re-enter. A long time ago. Believe it or not, a long time ago, you could not re-enter in tournaments. And even before that, you could not buy in late. If you showed up late, sorry, you're out of luck. Anyway, sometimes you bust early, and I would go and I would play cash games at Bellagio. And one day out of 7, give or take, the 5-10, 10-20, and 25-50 games would all be very tough. So, would I sit and grind it out and hope they got better, or would I just pack it up and go home for the day and take one day off? Well, I would pack it up and take one day off. It's okay, right? Just because the game exists, and even because you normally play that game, does not mean that you have to play it. If you consistently play games that you are not bankrolled for, either because you don't have an edge against your opponents, or there's a ton of variance, or, you just don't want to take on the risk, if you consistently play in these games that are bad for you and bad for your bankroll, you're gambling. And if you're gambling consistently, well, you are very, very live to lose. And I don't want you to lose. I want you to win at poker. And remember, to win at poker, you have to do 3 things. You have to find a game you can beat, you have to play it a lot, and you have to keep a proper bankroll. If you do these 3 things, you will succeed long-term in poker because you're consistently playing in a game where you have an edge. And if you're properly bankrolled, you'll be able to withstand whatever variance you have in that game. Do those things, succeed. I wish you the best of luck. And look, I think a lot of people take pride, or they get excited by the idea that they're gambling, and sometimes they win and they have big upswings and big downswings. But I have a group of friends who've played poker for as long as I have, 20-something years, and none of them have ever gone broke or been anywhere near broke. And that's because they have discipline. They do these 3 things consistently. And if you do these 3 things consistently, you will succeed. And if you do 2 out of the 3, maybe you'll make it. If you do 1 out of the 3, well, you're drawing pretty dead. And if you do none out of the 3, well, then obviously you're drawing super duper dead. Good luck, have fun, make the most of your opportunities. If you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor. Click the like and subscribe button below. If you have a poker friend who does not do these 3 things, share this video with them. If they actually listen to the advice, they will be eternally grateful because maybe, just maybe, they'll start winning some money from poker. So share it with them. Do them a favor. Good luck, have fun, keep a proper bankroll, and I'll talk to you next time.